No matter how smart or experienced we may be, there is a multitude of psychological and social factors that affect our decisions. Behavioral finance is an interdisciplinary study that dives into understanding exactly that, exploring the psychology behind finance and digging deep into the reasons why people make irrational financial decisions. In this video, we touch on the brief history of the field of behavioral finance and why it's important in this modern age. Behavioral finance has been around since the 1980s, but came into mass popularity after the 2008 financial crisis. Considered to be a relatively new field, behavioral finance arose by accident, as economists and professionals attempted to understand the psychology behind our financial decisions, noting that the conventional theory that the stock market moved in predictable, rational ways was in fact an inaccurate way of looking at things. The financial market is actually full of inefficiencies, as it is largely influenced by investors' flawed thinking on pricing and risk. By studying cognitive psychology and behavioral economic models, researchers in the field of behavioral finance found that investors often traded based on feedback models of other investors, rather than on any new information. This act alone demonstrates the inefficiencies that conventional financial theories fail to explain or consider. In 1979, two of the most prominent figures in the field, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, published a paper titled Prospect Theory, an analysis of decision under risk. As noted in their paper, people make decisions based on the potential value of losses and gains rather than the final outcome. Amos Tversky, Daniel Kahneman, and Richard Thaler are considered to be the founding fathers of behavioral finance and economics, each contributing their own ideas and thoughts to shaping the field into what it is today. Now, one prevalent aspect of behavioral finance are cognitive biases. When people are confronted with complex decisions, our brains often rely on mental shortcuts, also known as heuristics, to help us decide quickly. This is often the case when it comes to investment decisions. The problem with this is that it can often lead to inaccurate beliefs and, in turn, misguided judgments. This is inevitably what leads to what was mentioned before, cognitive biases. While there are a plethora of biases that affect the human mind and behavior, some of the more common ones mentioned in behavioral finance include the confirmation bias. This is a tendency for people to pay more attention to information that supports their prior beliefs and preconceived notions. This ultimately leads to interpreting and recalling things selectively. In this social media age where we all live in some form of echo chambers, we listen to or watch things that tend to agree with our beliefs. An investor that is subject to confirmation bias may not act on any information that contradicts his beliefs when investing, and this can be such a dangerous thing. Familiarity bias is another one. As the name implies, this is where we prefer to stay in our comfort zones, refusing to act on anything that we are not familiar with. On a social level, we may see this every day when it comes to people that only hang out with others of a similar race or nationality. When it comes to financial decisions, however, investors may only end up favoring familiar assets, hesitating to diversify, which leads to subpar portfolios. Self-serving bias is another one. This is when people attribute successes to their own skills and efforts, disregarding luck or external forces. But when it comes to negative results, they attribute it to bad luck or circumstance. When it comes to financial decisions, this can be dangerous as you fall into a sort of delusion, believing your choices can't go or be wrong. Finally, another common bias is the framing bias. This is when people make a decision based on how the information or data is presented, instead of looking at the facts themselves. The saying, looking at the glass half full or half empty, can echo this point strongly, as the way we frame a specific situation is how we choose to react to it. When it comes to investing, the way something is framed can lead to investors concluding whether it was a good or bad investment. Looking at the two options on the screen, we can see an example of the framing bias in effect. On the left, you see option A, which states, in quarter 2, we earned $120,000 compared to expectations of $125,000. On the right, we see option B, where it states in quarter 2, we earned 120,000 compared to quarter 1, where we earned 115,000. As you can see, the earnings were the same amount, but option B was framed in a way to be an improvement over the previous quarter. So for anyone reading, B feels much more positive. Regardless of how calculated and experienced we may be with our finances, we're all still human. Even some of the smartest financial analysts and economists have made mistakes when it comes to investments or predictions. As humans, acting off of emotion is natural, and our brains, as much as we'd like to believe otherwise, are still not biologically programmed to deal with abstract concepts such as money. To take emotion out of our decision-making process, you need to train yourself to maintain logical, methodical thinking and be reflective instead of reactive or reflexive. By becoming more aware of the psychological influences that define our decisions and understanding more about our brain, investors can learn to be more cognizant of the biases that control us and avoid the costly mistakes of potentially foolish financial decisions. Of course, understanding the psychology and behavior of money is not something that can be summarized all in a single video. To really dig deep into how our brains perceive money, watch the video on the left and make sure to subscribe if you want to learn more about subjects like this.